So I first again want to say thank you so much. I am Michelle Portier, the CEO of Michelle Speaks. If you hide it, you can't feel it. I'm also the founder of Healing Women, Healing Nations of Northeast Florida. And with the current unrest and the things, the racism pandemic, as people are labeling it, I thought it would be remiss of me as a leader not to address it. And on that end, I've interviewed several people regarding the George Floyd and the bigger issue of the racism being systemic, and this George was just the catalyst to kind of bring attention to that on an international level because the whole world is watching now, and all of the things that are going on. And so when Leslie reached out to me, um, we had the conversation, and she said, she just wanted to do something and suggested that we bring a diverse group of women together, and I was completely on board with that. And so the objectives here today are just to start the conversation, be candid, share our hearts and see what we can do individually um, to be a part of the solution, and possibly what we can do collectively to be a part of the solution. And so on that end, there were like just three major questions that I had, I guess, as a conversation starter to open the floor to dialogue. And as everybody goes around and introduces themselves, these are the questions that I have, and we can go back to them. And my question would be, what compelled each of you to want to have the conversation, want to come together? And then what does racism mean to you? What is your definition of racism? And then from there, the three things that I hope we leave here with is understanding the root of racism, understanding to what degree that we are willing to be accountable and hold other accountable within our sphere of influence to being a part of that solution, and then understanding that there is no quick remedy, and that this is going to be a long journey, and that we're just a part of that journey, to being a catalyst to having the hard conversations. And because that's what Michelle Speaks does, we have the tough conversations about things, and that people don't want to talk about in society and overall. This is outside of that realm for me, but I would be remiss as a leader not to address it and at least have the conversation. So that's enough about me. I'm going to go ahead and go around and let everybody introduce themselves, and then we can get right into it. I know that we're going to have different perspectives, but I know that we're all going to be respectful of one another. And so without further ado, I'll just hand it over to, and we'll just go in a circle. I see you want to introduce yourself, Miss Pollyanna Neely.
Hi, I guess I'm the only one in the group that doesn't know each other. I'm Pollyanna Neely. I am the co-founder of an organization called Active Veterans with Answers, in which we have two subcomponents, Vet Girls Rise and Dimes for Homeless Veterans. What compels me to this conversation is not only life experiences, but because I have three boys. I have grandsons, and there's lots of reasons why this is a bigger story for me than George Floyd. This is life. And I know that changes can't be done unless we get in the room, meaning we get in the room with the change makers. And not that each and every one of us will be able to walk into a room with change makers, but just the fact that knowing that changes can be dominoing. So each small conversation is a domino to another conversation. And hopefully that will impart a mind of change before we really get what we want, is a heart of change. Michelle, do you want me to answer all the questions or just one?
No, just we can start off with that one and then just have the conversation. Yeah.
So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
We're glad
you're welcome. Who wants to go next? Okay, Leslie.
I'm Leslie Ender, and I am an entrepreneur, on a small business scale. And I reached out to Michelle. First, I've gotten to know Michelle, and we were in a mastermind together she's on all my social media. I'm on hers, and everything she said really resonated with me. And it was on my list to reach out to her. And honestly, I think I was a little hesitant, oh, well, she had a group on Friday nights, and I was thinking about going to that group, and then I wasn't sure because I didn't know anybody, and would I be accepted, and just those things that go on in our brain, which is program. I mean, that you can't live in a culture without absorbing it. Even if you can't put words to it, you absorb a culture. So I did, and we had a fantastic, I think, heartfelt conversation. I'm also a woman of faith. And my history is I grew up in the Detroit area, and I saw a lot of the racism that I saw around me was mostly like derogatory comments, saying just underground, but face value. People were, in general, in my community, they would never say it to anyone's face, but it was behind closed doors kind of a thing. And I grew up with that. And so I won't go into all the experiences that led me to a very different place, but a lot of it is just getting out in the world and getting to know people. But a big eye opener for me, that I shared extensively with Michelle, that I'll try and encapsulate, is that I taught in Conroe, Texas, and it was one of the scariest places that I have encountered. And the reason I got to see a lot of the scary stuff is I was a special day class teacher for elementary school. And I realized, it didn't take me very long to realize that in Conroe, Texas, desegregation laws came in, and shortly after, special education laws came in, and they used the special education federal mandated laws to actually keep their schools segregated. So I realized that I was the only white special day class teacher in a white school, and they had closed another program with about 5 white students that needed services. So I think they decided they needed a white teacher. And so it took me a long time to figure all this out, because I go to schools to observe children, and but somebody pulled me aside. Actually, I got to know a Black woman, the only Black woman in this entire school district, who explained to me these things. So I had to intervene. I tried to work with the kids' families, and I tried to involve social services. I actually had a CPS refuse to come to intervene with the child, because she told me, oh, that's just how those people live. So I won't go into everything I saw, but it was like wide open for me, and it was overt, and it was violent. And their police force was very brutal, especially to the Black community, but really to anybody who even talked back to them was at risk, because it was a whole cultural experience. A cop pulled us over, and I had a Texas friend, and she was literally shaking, and I said something to the policeman, I didn't think we were going as fast as he said we were, and she shot me a look like she was terrified, and it was a different experience for me. So anyway, long story short, then I lived in Texas as a Northerner. Big thing for me was living in Europe as, again, an outsider. I didn't know the language. Then I am in the process of leaving a marriage, and I experienced, I would say, institutional bias and sexism in the church. Ended up having to leave my church. And so all that just opened my eyes wide open. I also made a commitment to myself as a young teacher that I would do something to, I wanted to do something to change the lives of those kids that I saw. Because to me, they were bright little lights with so much against them. But of course, I never, life went on. I never did anything. So now I want to be more talking to the people who put the blinders on because they're frightened of change, and they're not hearing the message, and they want to say, if you personally cannot, quote, be racist. Many white people say, I'm not racist, but they don't see their blind spots, and they don't want to see the systemic, endemic issues in our society that are there. So I think that's in a nutshell why I wanted to do this today, because I want to be part of the solution. And just like Michelle said, and Polly said, that it starts small. It's like rain, all these drips. It can, be at the very highest part of government, of course, needs change, but we all need change in our hearts, every single one of us. And so, yeah, I want to be a part of that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's very insightful. So either Robin or Annie, whoever wants to go.
Hi, I can go next.
Okay.
So I'm Annie. What compelled me to want to participate is, I think it's a realization that I've had that I have a level of anger, and that is much more powerful than I allowed myself to think. I'm from Georgia originally, and experienced a lot of exposure to KKK events and people that were in that type of mindset, and you knew that it was going on all around you. And what do you do with that anger of knowing that you are considered less than, and that it is the true way of life, an assumption that the people in my area at the time had? And what do you do with that anger? So when all of the rioting and all of that stuff was going on, I live in the Philadelphia area now. But when all of the looting and burning and all, of buildings and burning of cars and stuff was going on, I was of two minds. Of course, you do not show your anger that way, right? That's just not the right way to show that anger, and I would never ever do anything like that. But I could feel that same level of rage that we have had to live under this type of feelings. You knew that people thought, a whole segment of people thought that you were less than and treated you in a way that you were less than. What do you do with that anger and that level of knowing that that's how you're thought of, but you still go through life and smile, and you know that all people aren't that way. Leslie and Robin are my friends. So it's not that you see all white people as mean or hateful or or racist either, but you know that there's an undercurrent there that we all live in, all of us. And the day before this occurred with George Floyd, we had been living it. We had been living it the whole time, and we have all known that. And that made me even angrier at me for accepting it and being okay with it. It's anger at our society that we as Black people have had to live through it and assimilate and be okay with knowing that people don't like you. And what do you do with that anger? So when you see those people looting and, it was crazy. That enraged me as well, but you could understand they did not know how to handle or do what to do with that anger, right? So getting that across and working in corporate, so I work in corporate America and have done so for lots and lots of years, over 30 years. It truly took me by surprise just how angry I was. And I'd say one of the positive things about COVID-19 pandemic, if you can imagine that there's any type of positive in it, is that I did not have to be in the office and actually see anyone face to face, because I am not sure how I would have handled my anger. And it wasn't directed exactly to a person, but just I would be in a situation of having to constantly explain to someone why I'm angry, and then the possibility that they didn't understand it. And how was I going to react to that? Why am I spending my time trying to explain to people that you should be humane? Just humane. That's it. I really have to explain to you that you should be humane and not automatically not like a Black child, or think that your white granddaughter is less as valuable and important as my 3-year-old granddaughter. Oh, well, she's a little, I mean, so I think that just it angered me, and I did not realize how strong that anger and feeling of being treated in an unjust manner was. So hopefully being able to discuss it and get people to actually hear, that was important. But I knew that my anger was too strong to be in the office and discuss it in a rational way, to also then be effective to allow someone to hear what I was saying. I've gotten better over the weeks, but that anger is still
Simmering.
underneath the surface.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's simmering.
It is.
Wow. And I've been
Amazing.
learning a lot this last year, but one thing is I'm trying to learn is to use my anger and my rage, because we all have anger and rage about things in our life at varying levels and degrees. As I say, okay, I'm going to channel this for good. I'm going to channel this for change. I'm going to channel this forward. And that helps me.
Yeah. And to what Polly said earlier as well, I have 2 sons, and that is a whole nother level of emotion that you have to manage. When do you determine that you're going to crush your baby's spirit to help them so they're protected in the society that you have to allow them to go out into? So you're allowing your precious baby to walk out into an environment that you know that they're going to treat them unfairly. So, and when I look at my 2 granddaughters, they are going to walk out into that as well. How do you crush the spirit of your child? Do you do it at around six-ish, because they're about to go into the school system, right? Do you do it when they're 10 or so, 13? Don't wait until they're 13. And I've had lots of experiences with my boys, of thinking, I'm trying to protect them, but they're thinking that I'm racist. Like, Mom, why are you saying those things? No one's going to think about us that way. What is wrong with you? You delicately have to do it in layers. And then, unfortunately, even with both of my sons, at 10, my oldest son experienced a racial assumption about him walking in the neighborhood. Someone called the cops because they saw a Black kid walking in the neighborhood. So, of course, the cops came to question him that he spray painted something.
10?
I'm sorry?
10?
10.
He was 10?
10. Yes.
Right.
So
Well,
it's
it happens younger.
tidbits.
It happens at younger ages as well, especially.
Yeah. It does. And when do you crush their spirit, but at the same time, try and help protect them, right? And also balance that they don't become, that they learn how to handle that rage, so they're not one of those people looting. It's a huge balance that you have to do as a parent. You want them to be aware, but you also want them to be open-minded and sweet and nice people, and have some white friends. But at the same time, you have to protect them to say, well, some of those people may not like you just automatically. But what do I have to do, Mom? Nothing. Just be born. They just don't like you. But be
But
nice.
Annie,
Yeah,
you
but
just want them to come home.
and I want them to come
You
home.
want them to come home.
So real quick, my son, my oldest son was in college, and this Sunday morning he gave me a call. Hey, Mom, guess what happened last night? I'm like, what? So the night before was a Saturday night. Okay, freshman in college, what do you do on Saturday night? Stick out at a park somewhere, right? So he was called. He said that he and his friend were pulled over about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was not driving. His friend was driving. The cops came up to the window and said, "Where are you guys going?" They said, "Oh, we just came from a party. We're going back on campus." And then they started questioning them and asking, did they have drugs in the car? And my son said, no, we don't have any drugs in the car. He said, Mom, then the cops, I'm sorry, I forgot one piece of information. He said that they were pulled over, and then he looked up and there were 3 cop cars that came and surrounded them, right?
Mhm.
He said, then he started asking the questions, and then he started goading them, saying, you sure you don't have anything in the car? So if we search this car, we're not going to find anything. And my son was saying no. And it was getting heated. It was getting heated. And he knew his friend that was driving was getting heated, right? And he said, Mom, I heard your voice in my head, because I've always told him, do not, I know they may be speaking to you in a mean way or a nasty way, and then you get upset, and then they're going to say you were trying to uh, right, cause more, not listening to them, and then they'll have an excuse for treating you mean. So hear what they say, be calm, right? And finally they let them go. He said, but they sat there and ran the tags on the car and was just mean to them, but he had to help his friend stay calm. I'm like, Ryan, I mean, I actually started shaking just thinking about it, because they could have been killed, they could have been chopped up and thrown in the woods of North Carolina, and no one would have known, just because they weren't able to handle their anger of being treated unfairly and unjustly, right? So it's those things that go through your mind all the time with your children, of who is not giving them the benefit of the doubt, because that's what happens. We as Black people do not get the benefit of the doubt. You're Black, you're guilty, and we'll worry about the rest later. But pretty much, we know you're guilty, and that's unfair. And what do you do with that anger?
So
Okay.
thank you for sharing that. And
Wow.
so you're compelled to be here to learn how to channel your anger, or to find avenues to channel that anger in a positive way. And I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell you, I completely resonate with you, which is again why we're having this conversation. Pollyanna and I had a conversation yesterday. But anyhow, I'll digress. Robin.
That's really incredible and powerful. Quickly, who I am. My name is Robin Joy Myers. And thank you. Thanks for including me and having me. I work with women. I'm a speaker and a coach, and I do retreats with Leslie. But, I call myself a fear strategist. My background is molecular genetics, and I try and help people really sequence fear from the science perspective of it happens, to find their true joy. And what I call joy, which happens to be my middle name, is really just own you. And Annie, as you've talked, as all of you have talked, now I'm angry. So, I mean, and I've been angry, but here's some of my thoughts. I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. My daughter's 23. My 2 sons are 25 and 28. Oldest lives in Austin, Texas. My middle guy lives outside of DC. And my daughter, who lives in New York, has been staying in Northern Virginia with us since COVID started. I don't have to worry about, and I realize this, my children going out to a party. I don't necessarily, I mean, cops can be, well, we can talk about that, another thing. They can get pulled over, but they'll have a chance to explain or go to court and not be deemed guilty for just being in the car with friends. And that is a privilege.
Mhm.
And so my kids are incredible advocates and have taught me so much. And as upsetting as George Floyd and what's transpired has happened, maybe this is finally the time that we can all start having this conversation. And that's what I hope for, is that, you know, as well, I'll try and get my thoughts here, but as this transpires, that finally we can wake up. My daughter, who is an actor and obviously has a diverse group of friends in New York City, growing up in Waterford, Virginia, there wasn't as much diversity, but she really has enlightened me. And, you know, I watched 13th. I don't know if any of you have seen 13th yet. It's about the 13th Amendment and it's on Netflix. And I think everyone should watch it, because what a shame. And frankly, to the United States, it has been an imbalance from the start. And so for anyone to say that, well, 95% of cops are good, or, you know, there isn't necessarily, you know, my intentions are not to have any sort of racist. I don't. And he's a good friend of mine. I have many friends who are Black. But I will say this, when I watch that and I see how society has been set up, there is certainly such an imbalance of this white privilege and Black. And it's funny because I've gotten into so many arguments with my husband. Leslie knows, and Annie knows, I'm in the process of divorce after 30 years. But this is not one of the reasons, well, maybe it is, but he's a football, you know, addict. And we were talking about the Drew Brees situation and his comment, and then the rebuttals and so forth. And I just was out with friends last night, well, social distancing in my garage, but the conversation was about, but he was standing up for the flag. And I was so angry last night because I said, he's saying that his grandfathers fought in wars for the flag. And do you not understand the concept? And it's not even the concept. What has happened is the flag represents totally different things. The flag to Drew Brees' grandfather, you can't say that represents liberty and justice.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't.
Yeah, it
there
doesn't.
were white soldiers and there were Black soldiers, and there were some of these athletes saying, but my grandfathers fought as well, but they came home to not having the rights. They came home to not having the same privileges. So it is time for us to wake up, and it's embarrassing because, frankly, you know, we could have the best intentions in the world, but if any white person does not look at themselves in the mirror and say, intentions don't matter at this point, it's the impact. Because if you don't have an impact from these conversations, it's all irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely irrelevant. We have to have impact now. And that goes across the board. And, you know, you hear the arguments of, obviously, you know, Black Lives Matter, and then you hear people like, well, all lives matter. No, that's not what's going on. And it's so frustrating to hear. So if I can help, you know, start this conversation, you know, I talk about women's empowerment and I speak for women as much as I can across the world. And I have a conference coming up, and actually someone pointed something out to me, that they looked at my my list of speakers, and do I not know any Black courageous women? It's called the Courageous Women's Conference in July. And actually it was going to be in June. I want to talk to you, absolutely. But so here's the situation, and here was kind of the aha, not one of the aha moments, right? She had said, and I don't know this woman, it's in a private like business group, but she made it public. And I said, I would love to have a conversation with you first to learn who you are. But, my initial response was, I was filling slots according to the topics. And then I sat back and I had Kira, my daughter's name is Kira. She goes, "What's up?" And I was like, I feel saddened because that's not who I am. And she said, "Mom, she's right." And you know what? So I sat with it and I was like, so if I want to speak for women around the world, then we all need to plan better. I need to take more time and I need to say, and have a diverse community, right? And my intention wasn't there, but my impact showed otherwise.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt, Robin, but a lot of it is really it's where my anger came from. We all have become so conditioned to our way of life and our culture that you just accepted things, and it's
Right.
not that you're doing it on purpose.
Absolutely not. I
Right.
agree. But now we all have to, if the awareness now is there and we can
Right.
stop, that's I think the beauty of COVID. Like we have this chance to pause. So
What an oxymoron, right? The
totally,
beauty of COVID. Yeah.
totally. But we have this chance to pause. So let's do good. I happen to be Jewish. And so someone made this comment about Holocaust and things like that. Okay. And so then the comment was, I'm like, actually, I think Kira said this. I have to give her credit for this. She chimed right into whoever and came up with said this comment because we looked at each other. She said, "You don't know if I'm Jewish or not, but the color of my skin, you're being judged by the color of your skin." So the religion, so what? That's not the issue either. It's
right.
You're being judged purely on the color of your skin. So
it matters not. It matters not. And that's just some of the feeling of being enraged as well. It matters not. Vanessa Williams was at the White House. I forget which year it was. And some white lady asked her to serve. I mean, she thought she was one of the servers. It matters not. It's the color of your skin that they see first, and they choose to throw you in this big ball of oneness. You're all just black, period.
This woman who
at facial distinctions. You're all black.
I was just going to say to finish up my part was one of the women I have met who lives in Australia who's black. I think her husband is from England, and she was telling me yesterday morning that when they would go visit England, she wasn't talked to. They have 3 children, and he was asked, "Is she with you? Is she the mother of those kids?" When they would go back to Malaysia, where her parents were living, he was welcomed like, he was the Royal Highness of the world. Oh, excuse me. But anyways, I guess, I think this conversation is so important to have, and I thank you for letting me be part of it. But we have to do something. And I think this is just an opportunity for the world to say, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 3 at a time,
5 at a time. So
5, 10, yep.
I want to thank you, Robin, Leslie, Annie, Pollyanna, for sharing, why you compelled. I'm feeling a whole lot of emotions right now. I have been since the beginning of all of this. Another reason that I am compelled is I don't have sons, but I have a daughter and I have 2 grandkids. And I've experienced racism for years and I have never become accustomed to it. I've just come to a place where I've learned to pick and choose my battles based on environment, circumstances, people around me and whatever was going on at the time. But I'm at a point now that I want to channel the anger, the frustration, the disappointment, the heartbreak, the injustice of the inequality in a positive way. And hatred is not going to do that. because I've had hatred for years, and it didn't change anything. It just made me worse, and the circumstances that I became involved in worse because of the hatred that overrode everything else. Um, the only thing that's going to change, and I love how you put it, Robin, is having impact over intent. Um, and the only way that we're going to do that, and the root of that it's going to come from a place of love, truly loving others beyond um, the racism, that's been conditioned, because that's something that is learned. And just as we've been conditioned to learn how to adapt to the hatred and I believe the root of it is fear, the racism, is to address it head on. And so, thank you for you guys' feedback and your perception as to why you want to be a part of this. And I think us doing what we're doing now is just the thing that's needed. And hopefully, prayerfully, the objective is it'll be the catalyst for others to begin having the conversation. But I think another thing that is going to have great impact, and Pollyanna touched on it earlier, is that getting into, because it is a systemic thing that has been ingrained for generations, getting into the system to begin to make change internally is the pathway to having lasting impact. And how do we do that within our sphere of influence? So I think those are some of the things that we want to talk about, because we know what we've experienced. But I wanted to get an understanding from you, Leslie, and you, Robin, and I'm not singling you out, but just from your perspective, what is your definition of racism, and what is your understanding of what the root of that racism is? And, we can all chime in. I don't have to direct this. I'm just
Okay. Well,
we're having the conversation.
well, I'll answer that, because first of all, we know that it's, well, I'm gathering my thoughts here. This is something that I've thought about, I think about, because I lived in Europe for 8 years. Now, Europe, it is not racist free. They have issues. But in general, their society runs very smoothly. The police handle everybody different. There's not this like immediate going in with force. I mean, it's and when I first moved there, you hardly even saw police. And I thought, why are the cities so different here? And where is where's the poverty? Where's the bad? I would say, where's, you want to know when you're walking a city, where shouldn't I go? Because crime. And in the city centers in Europe, the entire city, usually the downtown area, is the most prolific, people living there for years. Now, I'm not saying they are racist free, because on the outskirts of Paris, there's some, horrible areas. So please don't hear that. But the thing that I concluded myself is that on top of the racism, that the US has a horrid wound that is slavery. That is a wound, because our country in many ways was founded on that. And the only way you can do that is if you take the stance that you're better, you're more powerful. And I will talk faith, pride, not in that you feel good about your accomplishment or acknowledge that, pleasant things about yourself. But pride is when you think you're better than somebody else. And so I think for that system to work, you have to dehumanize and objectify what is working for you for power and for wealth. So those systems have been in place for hundreds of years. And by no fault of any African who was, taken away and sold, they didn't ask for that to happen to them. So I feel like our country has an extremely huge wound from that, because the origins were so ugly. So what is racism? I think in one word, it's looking at others as less than yourself. It's not recognizing your own privilege, and it's fear, because if you have dehumanized someone and objectified someone, and you do that to feel better about yourself. This is a dynamic in every abusive relationship, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's a society. You feel, if you power over, then you don't have to deal with a lot of your shame or your guilt or your power or your ugliness. But once you identify and empathize with that person, that group of people, in this case, we're talking directly about the Black community in large, then you have to face your own ugliness and your own, maybe you're not as powerful as you thought. And let's face it, a lot of that power is about wealth. And you have to, there's fear based on you're losing something, and you're losing your wealth, but also your position. So that is not a concise definition, and I don't know a dictionary definition, but that's my definition just from my world experience and what I've seen. And I think it lines up with any ugliness where you decide you are better than someone and you use someone.
Well, and if I can interject real quick, I completely agree with that, Leslie. Think back really to get an entire race to be enslaved, right? You had to make sure that they understood emphatically that they were beneath you and that you were more powerful and that you controlled it. So, you have nothing, no ownership, nothing. Even you don't know where you came from, what type, I don't even know what country I came from in Africa. I think I've done 23andMe, so I know what area, the western part of Africa, right? But to power over an entire race, the white people at that time had to make sure that they were beat down, that the Black race was beat down, and that even the poorest of a white person, the poorest person, still thought that they were better than anyone in this particular race.
To do what they did, they had to.
They had to control people, right? To control the race.
But also, anyone who's really in touch with their own humanity could and never do that. So they believed it.
Yeah. Oh, of course, they truly believed it.
Absolutely believed it. And like so much that happens in the world today, they had Bible verses to prove it.
Oh, right. So I'm a special kind of person. I actually like Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. I don't know if you all remember that series.
I do.
I love that series. I started from the very first season a couple of weeks ago. Season 1, episode 1, right? But it was in the 1700s, I think, but of when it was focused on. But the Native Americans, the Indians. So when they came to take over the Colorado area, you were just a savage because you were an Indian. So give me your land. And they treated those people horribly. They had to move off of their land and be deemed savages.
Mm-hmm.
All because of power and wealth. And if you're going to control a race, that is exactly how you treat them. And you can see it with the Black race as well. You brought slaves over, and they were in shackles, they were treated and they were dehumanized. You, that is still proliferating in our society now, subconsciously.
And that's why the conversations need to start, laws need to change, people need to listen. But this is like a road, to me, it's like a road opening up, and it's going to be a journey.
It's going to be a journey. It's going to be a journey.
So
It has to be a journey, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be a journey because look at how many years this has perpetuated.
Exactly.
well, I think, like I said in the beginning, I believe George Floyd was the catalyst to
Mhm.
start that change, to
Yeah.
to begin not just having the conversations, but begin to have the impact that's going to instigate that change. Because racism, the root of it is fear. I just really believe that it's fear, and I don't know why it's so targeted towards African American men. It's all of us now, but I think the generalized thing that has come is that we have been deemed the visible invisible, and then systems have been systematically put in place that perpetuates that. We
Mhm.
don't have access or have knowledge of how to create and sustain long-term wealth. We don't have access as we should. And even when we do, people say it's an even playing board. But when you get in to apply for those institutions for higher education, to increase your wealth, to increase your knowledge, to attain the American dream, there are still those that are within those systems that will put things in place. Things are in place to prevent you from reaping the benefits, or to gaining that, such as, say you're qualified for a position and somebody else is qualified, another candidate, but you have the experience, you have the degrees, you have everything. The only difference is the color of your skin. More often than not, you're not going to get that position, and it's going to be deemed, well, you don't fit into the organization's culture. That's how they get away with it legally, but it still happens. So it's a systemic thing that we have to change from the inside, and we're not going to be able to change that alone. Not just blacks
Right.
trying to do it, not just some whites trying to do it. We truly have to come together and be united to be able to change that.
But that's exactly right. And I've
Mhm.
walked into many rooms because of my name
Yes.
before they saw my face.
Yes.
And so they see the name Pollyanna, and it couldn't possibly be me
Mhm.
that walk in the room. And I trust Michelle enough to not fear this conversation, because sitting back and listening, you're a bunch of friends talking. And this is the room that I've walked in. And I don't know Leslie or Robin from the Man in the Moon.
Mhm.
And their conversations can sound appeasing to me because I've heard them before,
Mhm.
because I don't know your heart. I don't know you. I'm the one that has been the Black girl walking in the room,
Ditto.
because racism is personal.
Mhm.
And I can't talk about it in generalizations until I do exactly what Annie said. I get over the anger of it being personal,
Mhm.
because there's things that I have been taught to take for granted to get along,
Mhm.
and to get through the conversation. The first couple of conversations isn't about what I need to change.
Mhm.
It's about you understanding where I'm at.
You know, I so agree with what you're saying. Twofold. You know, I appreciate you saying, like, I don't know you from Adam, so we have to get to know each other.
Right.
And it has to be more than one conversation, which
And
I hope we keep having, because that's how you build trust, and that's how you build. So I could walk hand in hand with you into a room and say, this is my new friend.
Right.
Right?
And I can comfortably talk to you the way Annie's talking to you.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, because you have a relationship. That's what I'm
Absolutely.
talking about.
Absolutely.
And I think Pollyanna, sorry to interrupt, Robin. I think Pollyanna, the thing is that you're constantly, just being in this society is draining. It's draining. It's just draining. Because when I meet, because when I meet people for the first time, and I say people, a white person for the first time, they have a list of stereotypes up in their head that automatically come up. Right here, it's right beside. And slowly they're like, oh, she's articulate. One of them goes away, check, and they get a little more comfortable. Oh, she's nice. She's eye contact. She's not shaking her head or do anything, another stereotype gone. I have to sit and wait to see that finally I'm possibly not being judged. Okay.
Or stereotypes.
But
Profile.
every first encounter is draining. In corporate America, I'm a director, and I can see it and feel it. They're assuming that I'm the secretary. You can see those assumptions right up front when I walk into the room. And then you can see the sense, them saying a collective, so she's qualified. That, and gosh, I can get into a lot, but it is a lot of stereotypes that are there, and it is draining. Every day you've got to put on your armor and go to corporate America. And if you meet someone new and they don't know you from a can of paint, you've got to wait for their own personal subjective stereotypes to fall to the wayside, because they're going to be there until you prove them wrong of those particular stereotypes that they have. It is draining. It's draining, and it's unfair to have that burden around you that you carry all the time. All of their fear and all of their stereotypes are there, and you've got to wait for them to see you as a human, to the
Not
capacity they can go.
Just a human.
No, a human, and it didn't always get that far.
And this is why I wanted to
No.
have a conversation too, Leslie, because I wanted you to hear and see not just our anger, not just our frustration, but what we have to deal with on a daily basis. I want you to see and hear, and Robin, our pain, the pain of losing loved ones to violence because of the color of our skin, the pain of having to feel that we have to dress a certain way or talk a certain way before they'll even begin to go through their list and say, oh, she's not this, she's not that. The pain of having to tell my daughter, you can't go in there dressed like that because they're going to perceive you to be ghetto. You can't go in there with your nails like that or your hair that color because they're not going to receive you as anything other than a hood rat. And that's the reality. Even though she's articulate, she's intelligent, she's smart, that's not seen. When people come to me and ask me, I just wanted to check on you with everything that's going on. Are you okay? No, I am not okay.
No.
I am not okay. I am not okay because I'm tired of having to feel like that. I have to assimilate.
Yeah.
I'm tired of, and I talk often about wearing this mask. I'm no longer wearing a mask. I haven't been wearing a mask for years now, but that doesn't negate the fight that there is every day to be seen as human and not to be seen as Black or not to be seen as less than. And so to start this conversation, that's why I wanted to understand what your definition of racism is. The things that you hear in my voice is the emotions that has been, and I'm sure Pollyanna and Annie can attest, the emotions that have been bottled up because of the years of having to assimilate, the years of having to prove myself that I'm not only qualified for this job, but I'm worthy and more qualified, or qualified to sit on this board, or qualified to be in this room, or qualified to have the basic human rights that Caucasians have, that white America has. I am entitled to that. I shouldn't have to fight for that every day. And so when I say that, You know, we all have prejudices, whether we say that we do or not. We do. I do.
Oh, I do
Mhm.
too.
I do.
No, I do
I,
too.
Yes.
I am in fear, and I hate that I feel that, because I know that I've done nothing wrong, and everything. Every time I see a car, a police car, and I'm driving, I damn near have a panic attack. Like, I'm checking, okay, my tags are okay, my
Mhm.
license is good, my
Mhm.
insurance is good. I'm
Mhm.
not
Make sure they're not following.
Yeah.
exactly
And
like,
yeah.
so
And you know
these
what?
little
That
things.
is something with my sons, they think I'm crazy. But I like the fact that they forget that their mail, some of their mail still comes to the house. Because if I see a ticket, I pay it immediately. They love that about me, right? Because I do not want them to have any excuse if they get pulled over. If they get pulled, I mean, do white women have to think about that for their children? No.
No, no.
I'm like, and you have to keep your, as children, I had to ingrain in my sons, you have to have your ID on you, period. Mom, they would run out to go play basketball or whatever. Do you have your ID? Yes, mom, I've got my, no, do you have your ID on? Yes. My son, my youngest son was 13. He came in one day and said, oh, mom, we not pulled over. We got stopped by these cops. They were looking for somebody in the neighborhood. My son had to show them his ID. I mean, and so then in the back of his head, he realized I'm not crazy. It is important to have your ID on you. And the man didn't believe that he lived in this area where I live. Not that I'm like fabulously rich or anything, but it's a decent neighborhood, right? Oh, how long have you been there? And he was like, why did he ask me that? What do you say? Do you demean the cops at that time and say, oh, they're police, they don't trust them? Like, no, I had to water it down and say, well, Andrew, you just don't know what's going on around in the area. He just probably had to check all kids. But I knew he was
And
being
you know that wasn't true.
exactly. But guess what? You also don't want your children to be bitter and to grow hate about them as well. So it is a constant battle that you want them to acknowledge what's going on in the world, but you don't want them to then grow to hate the cops and end up being people out looting and stuff. It's a lot of balance.
I'm
It's a
gonna
lot of
tell you,
balance.
my 6-year-old and my 5-year-old grandchildren already fearful of the police.
Robin, we're going to let you talk in a minute, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Already my grandchildren are fearful of the police. My daughter said the other day she happened to witness an accident, and you know, my granddaughter immediately was seized with fear. She got up and made sure she was in her seat, and she was like, what's wrong with you? She's like, the police, mom, the police. She had to use the bathroom, but she's like, I'll hold it. It broke my heart because already she knows to be fearful, or she feels that she has to be fearful of the police. And I, and I've instilled in my daughter, every conversation you have, even in your workplace, when things have gone on in her workplace where she was discriminated against, and I've had to tell her, document it, file a grievance. You can speak up for yourself. You don't have to take it just because you don't need that job like that. I shouldn't have to tell my daughter things like that, but I do, and I still do, because it's happening. But my mindset now is it's going to change, and it's going to change beginning with conversations like this. And we're going to continue to have the conversations, and we're going to continue to address the hard things, but also we have to hold those accountable. There's been no accountability, and they have to be held accountable, and they're going to be held accountable if it's within my sphere of influence. And so that's the thing we have. I don't know, I guess that's the thing I wanted to get out there. To what degree are we willing to be accountable and hold others accountable within our sphere of influence for change, even in the minor things? If somebody says something off color, makes an off color joke, will you confront it, even if it's a family member? If somebody outright, you see that them discriminating against someone, and that it is, will you stand up for them, even at the risk of maybe losing a job or, losing a friendship? Will you do that? I will. I've done it.
I just,
Go ahead.
I want to just go on that for a second, because I will, and I pledge to, but I also need you three to start and help me, because I want to be totally aware of all this. It broke my heart when I was watching one interview, and a father and his 8-year-old daughter, he's like, tell them what I told you. And she put her hands up, I'm 8 years old. I live here. My name is this. And like what she went through, which obviously is, what you're telling me, like your granddaughter, and the fear at 5 years old, which is unfathomable to me, because I didn't have to do that with my children. So yeah, you have my pledge on it as far as wanting to make a difference. And in saying that, I need to be able to have people like you three in my life, you too, Leslie, but you three strong,
I understand what you're saying.
strong Black women in my life to say, guess what? This is the reality, or that's not what that shouldn't be said, or if I offend you, please tell me. And to just define what racism is, yeah, it is prejudices, it is that. And it is, discrimination. Yes, it's fear. I think it's people's insecurities. I mean, people are insecure, and until they learn to be comfortable in their own, no pun intended, skin, sorry, probably the wrong thing to say.
It's the right thing to say.
but until people learn who they truly are and what their beliefs truly are, and can stand up for themselves, I think it's insecurities. And yes, that can roll into fear, but I need you three to be like, here's the reality, and here's the truth, and this is what I need from you. Because as I watch and unfold, and I go to the Black Lives Matters in Leesburg, Virginia, we've had incredible rallies, incredible rallies to be part of. I support that, but I also need to know what more I can do, because there is an imbalance, and I've been born into this imbalance. And yes, I could say my intentions, I have no racism, my intentions, but what's the impact again, right? So I do look for honest, open dialogue, as much as it stung when that woman's like, your panel doesn't look very diverse.
Right.
Well, I think the open-mindedness that you have, I mean, it's going to take probably another 50 years before we see the result of all that we're going to be doing, hopefully. Now that everyone's minds are open to realize what's going on, it's going to take a while. I think for me, from white people, what I want is the open-mindedness, because before it wasn't there. It was just shut. You didn't even think about it. At least for the next 50 years, to be open-minded, to understand it and hear what we're saying. That's a win-win in itself.
Okay.
But laws need to be changed. I'm sorry, Leslie. Laws do need to be changed. I mean,
Yeah, they do. They do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, but it's a lot of things that need to go on. But I'm not going to experience it completely in my lifetime, right? My grandchildren, who are 3 and 5, hopefully by the time they have children, maybe their children, it will be better, right? But I mean, this really started the year I was born, in 1963. Until now, we're seeing that it's still prevalent, right? We have come along.
Prevalent. It's just being televised now. Thanks to social media, it's being captured. So it's always prevalent.
Yeah. What I'm saying about prevalent is that you can see some changes. Do you think we would have been doing this 57 years ago, Leslie and Robin, on a call together with you chit-chatting and me going off to Italy with you? No. So we have moved, right? The emotional openness and getting along with each other, and being in society together and working together and having good friends. We have moved forward from 1963, right? We have. There's been some changes.
I want to give Leslie an opportunity, because I think she's been holding something.
I know, she's like,
yeah.
Go ahead.
So we're going to give her an opportunity.
Well, yeah. I wanted to say, first of all, my goal is to live authentically. So my goal is I will speak up. I will speak up. Oh, yeah, it was in a social setting. It wasn't racial, but it was still very inappropriate. Somebody told a rape joke, and I said that was not funny. And anyway, I haven't been invited back. So I'm okay with speaking my mind. And that's my intention. And before God, I hope I'm brave enough to do it in all the situations that might come my way. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I can't help but see the parallels with an abusive situation. So if you have someone who is being powered over, somebody has power over them, and it's an abusive situation, the person in there that is being powered over, they cannot change the situation. The only way that situation changes and heals is if the person in power, the person who sees all these things, they stop having blindness, denial, cognitive dissonance. We all have these things that we utilize to stay okay. So they have to see, they have to be willing to look in themselves, examine my heart, show me anything that's in there that I need to take a look at. And when people start, and that's why I think it's at such it's at all levels, but it's at an individual level to start looking at themselves, because it's going to take the people who hold position in society and our voices. I mean, we each have a sphere of influence, right? Some of us bigger, some of us smaller, some people have worldwide. But if each of us utilizes that to promote change, but to promote, like Robin said, if you're fearful, if you have insecurities, if you have shame, if you have all these things in yourself, you are much more likely to not want to let go of all that. They rather whitewash it, sorry, and stay with the things that make them feel comfortable. Because when Michelle and I talked in our initial conversation, she said, you know, by giving a voice to this, you have something to lose. And it's true. But I want to lose that, because I just want to live authentically and valuing all humanity and being willing to listen to the things that are hard to hear.
You know, any change is going to require sacrifice, and sacrifice only comes when you're willing to just lay everything on the line, to fight for that change. You know, there's a saying that, you know, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And so um, I hear your heart, Leslie. I hear your heart, Robin, and wanting to help and wanting to know how you can help. So, and Annie, you shared what you want, that you see is, and you just want open-mindedness, openness. So Pollyanna, I mean, what do you need? What do you need them to hear and them to see, and how we can continue the conversation?
I need them to hear that it's like nothing else.
Yeah.
You can't say, because people have told me and said to me, well, this is similar to Me Too. No, it's not. It's not, because in their mind, it's control and power. And mind you, it's more than that. It's far more than that, because every law they have on the books was put there with the right intentions. So yes, the knee on the throat was for war and for terrorism. So you can't say it worked sometime, but it didn't work sometime. There's no comparison. The fact is, in my mind, you have to first realize that Black lives matter, because the systematic changes that are needed impact Black lives. I talked about, because in a conversation they said to me, well, if they went to the trailer park and the police does the same thing with the people that live in the trailer park. And I said, probably, but guess what? They can walk in that restaurant down the street without a problem once the police leave. So it's not the same because one's white and one's Black. It's not the same. And if people don't realize that it is the Black life that has to focus the change that we need, because that is the culture that is most impacted. Not, I even got a letter from Special Olympics saying we are discriminated too.
Sorry.
Okay, because first you have to remain focused with the problem. The problem is the injustice of Blacks, because I see George Floyd, this movement, as we were a festering boil and George Floyd was the pen. Okay, and it wasn't a festering boil of police brutality versus anything else. It was a festering boil of just wanting to be equal under the law. Because I'm Black. Because you can't say, I don't see color. Because when I walk in the room, that's the first thing you see. Don't tell me anything else. The first thing you see is I'm Black, and your prejudices, not prejudices, your judgments are first on that foremost without me even opening my mouth. So it's not control. It's, in my opinion, it's not control. It's not anything. It's the fact that I'm in the skin that I'm in. And once you realize that my skin is okay, then we can start to have a conversation, because then you'll be able to hear the words coming out of my mouth, whether I say how you be or how are you today. You could still hear those words coming out of my mouth, because first you realize that your judgment is about the color of my skin when I walk in the door. I had, and I volunteer also, and I had someone come to my house so that I can work on his claim. He's a fellow veteran, just like me. And I was in the office of my house, and my husband was in the living room. And when he was leaving, because he walked right into the door, straight into the office, and when he was leaving, he said, so how do you avoid something like this? And I said, one payment at a time, just like you. Okay, and when my husband heard that, who is a big Black man, he proceeded to come and walk to the door. He didn't know the whole conversation, but he knew that the pitch in my voice got a little different. And he came to the door and he said, are you guys done? And I said, yeah, he's leaving. Because immediately that would have turned into something else, because my husband is protecting the color of the skin I'm in. Because I lived in an all-white development, gated community, and had one of my neighbors put a post on the neighborhood Facebook page. Did you guys see a Black man coming to the door trying to sell you something? And one of the other ladies said, that's Pollyanna's son selling camp cards for Boy Scouts. He was in his Boy Scout uniform.
Oh my God.
And he's a biracial child, so Lord knows he ain't my color. He's a vanilla wafer. looking child with some nice hair, okay? But because of the skin he's in, and we lived in that neighborhood. We were the only blacks in that neighborhood. So it's like nothing else. If at first you don't realize the issue is the color that I'm in, the skin that I'm in, regardless of everything else,
I hear you.
because that comes next. And maybe I shouldn't have been on this conversation. I don't know.
Are
Absolutely,
you
yes, you
kidding?
should.
But,
Oh my God, don't
but
ever say that.
it's
Absolutely.
important.
It is. No, but that's what I was saying as well before, Pollyann, that they see you. I don't think they truly realize it, but it's ingrained. They see you, and all of a sudden, a checklist pops up in their head. The stereotypes start slowly. You peeling them away. Seriously, they are there, and I don't
They're
think they
there.
No,
truly.
I agree. I agree.
I mean,
And
I
I
was asked one
truly,
time. Yeah, I mean, I was asked one time, do you feel uncomfortable being the only black person in, in an environment? And in IT, I'm usually the only black person, only black woman too. And I guess I was in the mood and needed coffee that day, but I said, I really don't look at my skin to acknowledge that I'm black. I'm just in the room.
right,
I'm
right,
in the room.
because
I'm a
you
person
have
and I'm in the room.
you have become comfortable with being the only one that it doesn't faze you, but every single one in that room knows it's you.
Exactly.
And I'm comfortable being the only one in the boardroom because I got in. And the fact is, I got in because they saw my resume before they saw my face.
Oh,
And then I had to make sure that my brain and my mouth were impactful enough that I got invited back.
yeah, but you know what? The thing is that company is used to me but then if you go to a new company, you've got to go through that all over again,
All over,
because
all
they
over.
don't know you. So you got to wait for all of those people. It's all subjective. Each person comes with a different level of checklist items.
So
And you got to wait.
over again. You got to
Yeah, over and over and over again.
Every
You're proving yourself.
single time. So
Yeah, every single time. It is so draining. I have a new boss. I'm like, oh my
oh,
God.
here we go.
Oh, geez. So for that promotion, if I'm going to get a promotion, I've got to wait until he is comfortable with me. So draining. So draining.
So one of my friends is making masks, and he made me this mask. It says Black Lives Matter, and on the other side it says faith over fear. Because I always say to them, it's a group of black people, that they told me diversify your board, and I said we're asking them. Nobody wants their face with our face,
right.
But because they'll do everything in the background, but don't put their face on this board with black people. Because I always say to them, the power of love will change their hearts. Because if you don't first, it's like I tell my kids, 3 phases: dream, goal, activate.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And I am less angry after talking a little bit. Every day I'm trying to be less angry, because there's so many years in my life, and my life being that privileged black, because despite being an American, I was raised for a long portion of my early childhood in the Bahamas. So I didn't face racism until I was 27 in the Navy. But then I'm married to a man from South Carolina that they burn crosses across the street from his house. So we don't see it the same way. But when we walk in the room, what's the first thing they see?
Black.
That's the issue. If you first, because they don't know how I was raised. They don't know how he was raised. He got a little bit of education, thank God. So the anger doesn't come out all at one time, but they don't get there because the first thing you see is what walks in the room. So that is the issue. And because, and this is all my opinion, but because things can be twisted and turned just like numbers to anywhere it is, they think we're just saying Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. Well, why don't Blue Lives Matter and Purple Lives Matter and Green Lives Matter? No, because purple and green and blue don't walk in the room. The first issue is something I can't control. Thank God he made me Black, because I wouldn't know how to do anything else, because this is all I know. But that, in my opinion, is step one. Step one is Black. Change those same laws that you have thanks, baby, to make sure that the Black gets equally treated under the same laws. We want to change everything. Stop the police from doing this. Stop the courts from doing this. Stop this from doing this. But these laws work. And I'm not saying they don't need modifying, because everything needs updating now and then. But can we first, before you take me into red tape mode, can you make it so that I can walk down the street, and if I jaywalk, I'm gonna get the same ticket as that guy there, and you're not gonna send 4 police after me and only 1 after them? Can you treat me equally and justly under what we have?
Across the board.
Across the board, because I'm Black.
And I will
Black first.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'm too one of those. It's a lot of times I'm the only, and I refer to it as ink spot. I don't know if that's politically correct or not, but I'm not politically correct.
They got blue ink too, red ink, purple ink. No, you're Black.
So a lot of times I'm the only Black in the room, and I've been fortunate enough to where there were people that had challenges with that. I had people that were white that spoke up for me. I was on a speaking engagement. It was myself and 3 other people, and they were interviewing each of us separately for a radio portion, for a spot on the radio. They were sharing our stories, and then we were going to speak to the group as a whole. And when they got to me, they were like, no, we can't have her on. We're not going to hear her story. And I looked, but the gentleman that brought us all in had to go and have a conversation with them and say, well, if you won't have her on, you're not going to air anybody's story. And so they interviewed me, but it's things like that. That's just one of many. And so, I agree with Pollyanna. It has to begin with them really understanding that Black lives do matter, and keeping the focus on it being Black lives, that we are valuable, that we are human, that we are not, the visible invisible. And that's how we're being seen, and that's how we're being treated. And that has to change before anything else can change.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Totally agree.
Right with you, ladies. And that's why, yeah, I just think it's powerful to have these conversations, and to be, and I hope many people, because we'll all share this, will listen, will really listen. It's my hope.
So I guess for each of you, what would you want to say to anybody that's listening in? What would you want to say?
I would tell people that to really, really look in the mirror and pause and listen. We're not listening. We have to listen, because it's these stories we're not hearing. We're not hearing the real life story. And as we were talking about, there is an unjust, if it's racism or if it's whatever that word would be, there's this unequal proportion that's been, whether we're born into it or not, doesn't mean we have to stay in this. It's time to make a change. And, thank goodness for social media, because if we didn't have social media, we wouldn't know about George Floyd. If someone didn't video this horrific thing, we wouldn't have seen it. And I don't think it would have escalated the way it escalated.
I think Polly was correct. It was like the needle.
Yeah, I think, it's time to make a change. Otherwise, history is going to just keep going and repeating itself until somebody, not really just someone, it has to be everyone. Everyone has to wake up.
Yeah, and I do think we have a window to get people's attention, because people tend to have short attention spans. I think there are a lot of people listening right now, because how can it not, well, I shouldn't say that. I would hope that it would prick your own heart. Like, again, this George Floyd was a needle. This is something that's been going on for a long time, and it's a long road to get past it. But that was, anyone who really watched that was a very traumatic event. And I can only imagine what it would be like as a Black person. But to see this man treated less than an animal while he's begging for his life and calling for his mother, and it was so horrific. It's horrible that it was so horrific, but it was so horrific that people are starting to go, wow, like, I care, what do I need? But I think, again, it's going inside and being brave enough to, because we all say, I'm not prejudiced, I have zero, but it's not true. Living in a different culture, living in Austria and studying about culture shock, because I was trying to understand it, it's this feeling of unreal. And they say there are things you learn in your culture that are never given words. In other words, you learn it through facial expressions and body language and observation. And you may believe or hold something, or it pricks you in a certain way because of those early experiences, or just those 70% of communication is nonverbal. So we don't even know what we have absorbed, believe, until we start looking at it. Like, that made me feel uncomfortable. Well, why did that make me feel uncomfortable? Why was I afraid? What do I believe? And I think more conversations like this and more voices coming together and more stories are imperative to catch people's attention.
I was just going to say, Leslie, you said a couple of things that really just rang true for me about, but there is white privilege. And I think everyone has to wake up and say, watch these things, donate to these causes, start looking and seeing how you can make a difference. Because there is a difference, and there is this privilege, and it is systemic. But what I will say, though, is yes, the time is now, the conversation starts now, but it can't end now. And that's the thing that people have to really, really, really hold on to. And this has to keep going, if it's weekly or monthly or whatever, and just grow and grow, because that's where we can't let the conversation die down, whether it's a month or 6 months or a year down the road, and then it ends. Because you look at the history, it dies down. And this is where I think there, I pray that this has made a difference. I pray that this unfortunate event, but fortunate in the sense of it's enlightening my world. It's enlightening people to be like, this is just not acceptable. You're a human being. Humans are humans, and everyone deserves a right to live.
So let me say, when we said earlier about when I said that I want the white world to America, rather, to have open-mindedness, right? We have seen these visuals before, but the minds were closed and it didn't resonate the same. Can't remember the guy's name, but in New York, I think he was pulled over. No, he was selling cigarettes, I think it was, right? And Eric Gardner, yeah. And he said as well, I can't breathe. We saw it, there was outrage, and we moved on with our lives. Rodney King, right? Treated like an animal and beaten how many times? I mean, just like an animal. We saw it. There was enraged, people were enraged, and we moved on. So we have seen the visuals. There's 18,000 more visuals we just didn't see, but we have seen the visuals. We have seen the visuals, and it was like this was the one that ripped the Band-Aid completely off.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
And that shows that our world, it is opening up a little bit. So it is great, and it's unfortunate that this happened, but I think it's right for the picking, so to speak. Now is the time that everyone, please, really open your mind to this. You've seen it. You've got some visuals. You've seen it, but please, let's open your mind and continue this acknowledgement that this is going on. And maybe there's some positive that can come from it, that everyone continues to talk about it and keep an open mind, and hopefully we can make some true change.
This is, this is for anybody that's watching, especially white America, this is what I want you to hear. I want you to hear and see. I want you to be able to not hear. I want you to be able to listen, and to listen, not just to respond out of the things that you've been conditioned over the years to respond to. I want you to listen to understand the plight that has been long-standing, the plight that African Americans have endured. I want you to listen to understand. I want you to see me not because of the color of my skin, but see me as human, that I am valuable, that I bleed the same as you bleed, that I worry about my children, that I want to achieve my dreams, that I want to further, my pursuit of the American dream. But I want you to see me, because for too long we have not been seen and we have not been heard, because of the color of our skin. Remove the veil that you have, the lens through which you see me and perceive me to be, because of what you've learned, and really open up your heart and your mind to hear and see something else. I want you to see me. I want you to see the hurt. I want you to see the pain. I want you to see the frustration, but I want you to be willing to have the conversation and continue the conversation, because now that we've started this conversation, it's not going to end and it's not going to stop. And we truly have to address our own biases and the hatred that has been ingrained for generations, to begin to really have the impact that we want to have. Because we need one another as a community. We need one another as a nation. And we're not going to advance the way that we should, the way that we were created to, if you continue to hold on to this bias and this prejudice without and numb your ears to what you don't want to hear because it's different, or you don't want to perceive because it's different. So hear me, see me, believe me, stand by me, and trust me, and fight for me just like you would fight for anybody else, because I am human. I'm not just an African American, I am human. That's what I want white America to hear and see and take away from this, and that we're going to continue the conversation.
I hear you. I'm sorry.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, likewise.
Did you have anything to add? Anything? Anyone?
I guess that I would hope that people would hear. I think they want to say, oh, that was one bad cop and that was just one incident, or people don't want to look inside themselves, and they don't want to see the bigger picture. It's easier to say, I don't know, there was a statement from our federal government that basically said there is not, I don't remember the exact quote, but there's not deep racism in the American culture. And it's like, no, because you don't want to see it. But it's played out over and over and over again. And it has been my own journey that I believe God has led me on that has broken these down and examined and looked. And it's been an internal journey for me because none of us personally started this. Do you know what I mean? It was generations back, but it's up to us to change it. And I think as a white person, when you feel you know, it's like, oh, I'm wrong, you know, like I'm bad, like but it's not about that. It's about, yes, there's terrible injustices, but first you have to see them and own them and stop looking away and stop making excuses for it. Because we are losing out as a society, because when you embrace everyone in their fullness and who they are, it's a beautiful thing of healing that comes. And I do believe it needs to happen on all levels. But as you know, you can change every law in the book. And unless there are changes in people's actual hearts and willingness to look at themselves, you can write every law in the book and you're not going to have the kind of change, because then you get more resentment and more anger from everyone. And that will not help any of us. So it's like, I think Annie said it, it's being open, being willing to say, okay, what is in me? Okay, do I care enough to make an impact? I may have had good intent. I think a lot of my generation, the good intent was be color, you know, don't talk about race, treat everybody equally, have your kids see you, not saying, oh, look, that's a Black person, that's my friend. You just treat everyone equally and you model that. But clearly that has its, you know, you're not educating your children. So that had some huge problems. But I do think the younger generation that we at least attempted that is much more understanding. Like I've been hearing from my own kids about, you know, I'll say, you should be thankful for this, and you have this education, and you have this, and their response to me was, yeah, but I have white privilege. And I'm like, I didn't know how, I'm like, don't demean your own accomplishments. But then I started saying to them, okay, but to whom much is given, much is expected. So if you see the inequality, then do something about it. You do have that privilege, so do something about it. But so as you can imagine, the first time my kids said that to me as a mom, that I'm not thinking about all that, and they felt like they were negating what we had all worked so hard for. But I understand it more at a heart level right now.
Well, that's truly the thing that's going to instigate the change that we need. And this is a time, and maybe this is the clarion call, and this is a wake-up call for every individual to begin to examine their own heart. You know, the word says, you know, the heart is wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it? So do you know your own heart? That is the ask. Do you know what's in your heart? And once you reflected and seen what's in your heart, are you willing to change the things that are not pleasing, that are not loving, that are not, you know, that's where the change is going to begin. And, you know, if you say, for those that, you know, have a relationship with God, or, you know, if you say that you love God and you've never seen him, but you hate me because of the color of my skin, do you really love God? Do you really have that relationship? And you have to examine that, because I don't, I've grown up around a diverse pool of people, you know, white, black, Oriental, Hispanic, all of that. So I love others. But that love gets distorted when I encounter the racism that I encounter. And so I begin to withdraw that love and shrink that love, but there's no more shrinking back. The time is out for that, because I truly want to love all, and I will work towards loving all, because I can't say that I love my Abba Father and I don't love others because of the color of their skin. And so, you know, I don't hate those officers. I hate what was in their heart, because when you looked at Derek Chauvin's face, that was pure hatred. That was pure, I don't even know how else to describe it, but that was something that was ingrained and that was learned and that he was taught. And so the only thing that's going to change is when people examine their hearts, and because of the love that's in their hearts, they're going to want to change those laws so that it includes Black lives as well, because right now we're not included. And so with that, you know, I want to thank you, ladies, because we can go on and continue this conversation. We've been on here for quite a while, but I want to ask, one, if you guys were nervous about having this call, and two, how you feel after we've started the dialogue. And we're going to continue the dialogue, but how do you guys feel? And, you know, any parting words that you want to say for those that are going to listen to this later?
Well, I did not feel nervous at all about doing the call. I think it is time for a conversation. So I was going to be open, and if you can't handle the truth, then you shouldn't agree to be with the conversation. You know, I'm going to be open and honest, and I thought it was good. So I'm glad I participated.
Thank you. How do you feel about, you know?
Me too.
Because
Because
no pun on that, me too.
no pun on that. Me ditto Annie's comments, because it's starting the conversation, you know, and getting over that discomfort. Maybe we need to have someone else in the room
Yeah.
that no one knows and hear their perspective, because it might be quite different than anything we've ever thought, because everyone's lives are different. Everyone's experiences are different. Everyone's heart is different. And hearing that in a group like this can only help empower all of us to seek things to change. So I thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, I wasn't nervous to come. I'm very thankful that I came, and I do appreciate being invited. And I appreciate the real talk, and I appreciate the three of you for being so open and calling us out, frankly, you know, and Pollyanna being able to say, like, you don't understand and you're right. And so I really hope for people that are watching, you know, if you don't have this kind of, like, start learning, just be open to learning and educating, and find this sort of thing to listen to and start asking questions, and don't feel that you can't ask questions, because we need to. You know, we could be blind and say, but I didn't know. Well, guess what? Then you're part of the problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I was not nervous because I just prayed. I'm like, just bring me there with an open heart and open ears and an open mind. And so I tried to do that. And I knew if I did that, that it would be okay. And I heard each of you. I heard your hearts. I heard your pain. I heard your stories. And you know, even if you are a white person and you don't think this affects you and in your world you're in, you know, it does. It affects all of us. And there's like such a rich community of people. We mostly speak about women, of women to enrich our worlds. And because of this, I think if you're really honest with yourself, we tend to want to live in our own worlds because that feels comfortable, and we're not having to address the elephant in the room. We're not having to address this huge issue that people they deal with it one way. I mean, the Black community actually lives it, and it's horrendous. And it's easier for white community to not see it, because once you see it, and again, you are a person who loves their children and cares about the world, you're going to love someone else's children and care about their world. So I hope people hear that. It affects all of us.
Time that it's our world together. Like,
Exactly.
please do that finally.
Well, bottom line, we need one another, regardless of, the color of our skin. I hope people hear that. There is no quick remedy. We're in for the long haul, but I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to start the conversation. And I would even go so far as to suggest that we invite others to have the conversation, look at our calendars and see when we can have the conversation again and continue the conversation. But as Pollyanna stated, someone that we don't really know well. I have people stopping me on the street when I'm out and about now, wanting to have the conversation. So engaging people that, we don't know that want to engage us, because I believe there are those that want to help, but they don't know how. And so their ask is having the conversations when they see us. What do you think about what's going on? Can you just, I went to the bank the other day to do some business, and the teller there started the conversation and, said that they're having the conversation in their home now because her husband is an officer, but her children, their adult children, are calling them on their biases. And so the conversations are starting. And so we just engage people like that. Hey, would you be interested in being a part of having the dialogue, having the kind of conversation, so that we can continue to sustain the momentum that we've started, and so that it won't die down. And it's up to each and every one of us individually to make sure that it doesn't. So thank you, ladies, for coming on, and thank you for us having the conversation, the candid conversation. And I'm glad that we were able to, speak with candidness and open our hearts and open our minds and speak freely and clearly, and get a better understanding a little bit, because this is my first experience meeting you, Annie. I know you, Leslie, by a mastermind group, and this is my first experience with you, Robin. But I don't feel like you're strangers anymore after just this one conversation. So I think that's the start of it, humanizing rather than, generalizing.
Hi, my two new friends.
Yeah, I have two new friends now too.
Me too.
I'm very glad we met.
Likewise. So let's keep the conversation going. Thank you guys so much for agreeing to come on and start the conversation. And stop.